after a year, after 1 year's time, we are back in the hot seats without video cameras.
Yeah, we lost the video in the war.
The pandemic took our camera away.
Yeah, it was brutal.
That's fine. We just need to talk.
Right, that's all you need is the sound of our voice.
So we're back.
Yes. Yeah, nothing happened. Like, that's the real reason why. Nothing ever happened in the entire year we were gone, so we just didn't make a podcast about it.
Oh, I thought you were trying to be serious. No. We were... I don't really have an excuse for us not being active, except that we were busy. Right?
Yeah, no, we've been busy.
I think we started the podcast thinking, who knows how long the pandemic lockdown is going to go. Mm-hmm. So let's start, we're reading the news more. We're figuring things out. We have our own opinions. We don't see them reflected out in the world. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about it. And then thankfully things kind of opened back up a little bit. I know the business picked up, which is great. Stereoscope. And then also our work, full-time jobs, family stuff, things were opening up. People were feeling good. And so we wanted to get back. When you lose something like that, you want to soak that up as much as you can. Mm-hmm. Things have been bubbling up underneath the surface for so long. Mm-hmm. Now, as far as the news.
Yeah, honestly, it was one of those things where, like, I remember we were talking about starting this back up again, and I had a conversation with you about, like, what direction we really wanted the podcast to take. And I was talking about, like, coming at it from the direction of kind of being an example of how to have thought-provoking discussions, how to really, like, think through an idea instead of just reacting based off of, like, your assumptions or just, whatever the standard rhetoric of our, mainstream culture says about said topic, and, like, really just be a good example of how to think in a verbal fashion. But and I actually had, like, a couple of subjects lined up of things that I wanted to cover, like, as their own episodes, and then something happened in the news that I was just like, well, I don't want us to purely be a news-driven, podcast of things that, in terms of the topics that we talk about, but I feel like this recent thing with the reconciliation bill, they snuck something into the reconciliation bill that will soon be voted on. I think they said they have to vote on it by the end of this month.
I think they originally wanted to vote on it last week. Mm-hmm. This is, by the way, we're speaking from October 3rd, 2021. It's that whole thing with the reconciliation bill versus the infrastructure bill. There's certain Democrats who are, I'll call corporate Democrats, who they want nothing to do with the reconciliation bill, because there's a lot of progressive senators and congressmen who want a lot of provisions in there. It's $3.5 trillion worth of things. And then there's the infrastructure bill, which is very corporation friendly. So there's a question as to whether any of these can actually pass, because the progressives are holding on their side. Like, we're not going to vote on the infrastructure bill unless you guys vote for our reconciliation bill. And then there's the corporate side that says, we don't really care about the reconciliation bill, so we're gonna not worry about that and try to vote through the infrastructure bill, and hopefully we get some Republicans on board with that. They're not having any luck with that right now, so it's very likely that neither will pass, right? Just because they're both holding strong on their sides. But it's a shame about the reconciliation bill it has so much in there. I believe 1,200 pages or more. It's
double that. It's
2,400 pages. Yeah, it's $3.5 trillion worth of bills. So, and it's, being a reconciliation bill, it doesn't mean anything other than the fact that it's just a bunch of stuff in one. It's basically a budget bill that the Democrats have put together since they're controlling basically all of Congress right now.
For the time being.
So it has a lot in there, a lot of great stuff, I think. Yeah. But you're saying you've discovered that there's something in there that they snuck in, as you said, that you're not. Well, why don't you explain it?
Well, it's something that I actually think whether or not this I mean, obviously it's worse, in my opinion, if it gets passed with this in it. But whether or not it gets passed, I think it warrants discussion purely because of what it represents in terms of precedent. And it actually even relates to a later episode, or an earlier episode rather, that we did a year ago when we had a discussion about mandating mask wearing and that principle. And I just want to preface right now, this has nothing to do with anybody's opinion about vaccines or vaccination or anything like that. I think that this warrants discussion regardless of where you sit on that subject. And just for the sake of, covering the channel's butt, because the powers that be are getting real ban happy lately when you talk about certain subjects. Nothing that I'm about to say or that Omeed is about to say in the process of this episode should be considered medical, legal, or financial advice. So just putting that out of the way. So the thing that they snuck in was essentially, like, at this point, we had already had essentially a mandate from OSHA in regards to vaccination for businesses that had more than 100 employees. That mandate said that they had to report on which of their employees were vaccinated, what their vaccination status was, and for those employees that weren't already vaccinated at the time, or were deciding or refusing or hesitant, whatever you want to say, the OSHA mandate required that they get tested and have a negative test on a weekly basis if they weren't vaccinated. So that was the out if you preferred not to be vaccinated for whatever reason.
That's how they got around calling it a mandate,
right?
For officially, because you had that out of the weekly test,
right?
Okay,
exactly.
Now, do you know if that actually went into effect?
It technically did, yes.
And if it did, do you know if it was only for certain types of companies, not just the 100 employees plus rule, but was it only geared towards certain companies and not others?
Well, I think it affected different industries at different times. I think the timeline was made different for certain industries, because I know that mandate came in and had to be issued sooner for medical companies, anything in the medical field. So I think that actually became official. Like, they had to either be 100% vaccinated or follow those mandates by like the 27th of last month. I think it's 27th and 23rd. My memory can't remember. It was in that range of dates though. And that has already caused...
We can look it up. We have the internet.
Yeah, well, you're looking that up. That already caused a bunch of people to leave. Like, we were already dealing with a labor shortage in general, and then also a labor shortage when it came to our medical staff. And that push had already invoked the response of a lot of medical employees leaving their jobs, which is not the best thing, I think most people would argue, in this time. But this new part of the legislation that was added into the reconciliation bill basically takes that original OSHA quote unquote mandate and cranks it up to 11, because what it says in that, I think it's like page 128 in the 2400 page bill. What it essentially does is it says for the same companies, 100 employees plus, is that you can, for each employee that is not vaccinated in those companies, the company can be issued a fine of $70,000. And if the company is found to have, if one company is found to be a repeat offender of not having vaccinated employees, or found to be willfully ignoring or, going against said mandate, that the company could be fined up to $700,000 in one go. Which obviously, even if you're talking about some of the larger businesses, a $700,000 fine is pretty hefty, especially because it can be issued multiple times if they find it multiple times, if they find them guilty of that.
Is that capped at... if they find multiple violations, they just do a blanket $700,000 fine? Like, that's like 10 employees.
Mm-hmm. So it's worded kind of loosely in the sense that, like, they're kind of lumping in multiple examples. Like, basically, if you have multiple cases of people not being vaccinated, or you're found to the company's not doing enough, like they basically investigate and they find the company's not doing enough to try and issue this, either or, they can be fined up to $700,000. However, on top of that, for each individual employee, they can be fined $70,000.
Okay, so it's in addition to that.
Yes.
Got it.
So obviously, this is putting a lot of pressure on these companies that have 100 employees or more, which affects, I think the number is roughly 80 million Americans fall under this jurisdiction.
Right, so almost a third of Americans.
Yeah, close to it.
Adults, I imagine.
Yeah.
Now, is there an out? Like we were talking about with the OSHA one that you were saying, there's that, the way to get around the mandate conversation or language is you can be tested once a week. And if you have that negative test, you are passing those requirements. Is that part of this? No,
this is more aggressive.
So this is a mandate.
This is an actual mandate, which is like they got around it with the OSHA because since it wasn't like an actual bill or passed by Congress, like you can't technically, like OSHA can mandate some things as a private entity, or not a private entity, but a government organization. But it has limitations in how far it can mandate certain things. And so the way that you actually make it a mandate is you have to pass it into law.
Pass a law.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
And so
what's the big deal? What's the problem? Don't we need people to be safe when they go to work? They need people to make sure they're not spreading this thing. What do you find a problem with this mandate, Alec?
Okay. He's playing devil's advocate. You can't see it now that we don't have our video camera. Like he's safe. Making his smarmy face at me.
Anonymity is wonderful. No, I'm serious. What do you find to be the potential issues? And again, we're not speaking so much of on the vaccine itself, right? Like
this has nothing to do with whether or not, like, I'm personally, like, I'll just say it, I'm personally vaccinated. I got both doses. Like, I think you are as well.
Right.
So it's not like we're sitting here, I'm not sitting here saying that like, oh, the vaccines are bad. Like I don't, like, right. That's not it.
So what is the issue that you find with this bill?
The issue surrounds the concept of, personal autonomy and freedom versus safety, right? This has been an ongoing conversation in our nation through various points in history, but especially now, lately. And it's also an issue of government overreach. I actually personally consider this to be an example of government overreach purely for the situations that it causes. So essentially, they're finding these businesses a ton to pressure these businesses to force their employees to undergo a medical procedure. That's what we're talking about, undergoing a medical procedure, which, by the way, some people are allergic to certain things inside of the vaccines. You can have allergic reactions to vaccines. It's well documented as a thing that happens. There could be, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but technically, there's usually religious exemptions for certain things like that. There is this through line in most of our history of like, when it comes to my person, I have the right to decide what happens with my person as long as it isn't directly, like I'm not using my body to harm another person, right? And now I know that a lot of people, and we went over this argument as well in a previous episode a year ago, I know that some might argue that, like, okay, in the case of a pandemic, you not being safe or vaccinated or whatever can potentially harm another person. However, we've never really taken this stance when it comes to most other communicable diseases. Like, the thing is that you technically aren't forced. This is true. You technically aren't forced to, like, I mean, I know I got vaccinated as a baby. I know you got vaccinated as a baby. Technically, the government can't force you to do that. Now, obviously, like, public schools don't have to admit your child if they're not vaccinated. That's fine. But saying that like either a government institution or, a private business can refuse service, right, for you not having whatever, is one thing, because that's still like everybody's consensual in that scenario. Like they know that like the school doesn't want to take you in for that reason. You can have other alternatives for schooling for your children if you don't want to do that. Not that I necessarily think that that's smart, but you have that option. You have that freedom. We've always had that freedom. And now we're in a situation where you're not taking it away in the sense that like you essentially send the police in and force people to get vaccinated, but you are creating a scenario in which you're basically making people starve unless they do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the issue here, is because like obviously it puts the company in this position where, well, if they don't want to get fined, and you don't want to, get vaccinated, then they got to fire you, right? And per the way that most laws, so in terms of receiving unemployment benefits, the way that it's written in most states, and it varies from state to state, the way that it's written in most states is that if you get unemployment benefits if you are fired for no fault of your own, right? If you actually like commit some sort of crime against the company, or you fail to observe a safety regulation and endanger other employees, and the company chooses to fire you for that reason, you're not eligible for unemployment benefits. Because of the way that this bill is written, that could be argued that them firing you for that reason could be argued as a reason for you to not receive unemployment benefits. So now, for simply not wanting to undergo a medical procedure, you could be fired from your job and also not get any financial support in that scenario. So you are essentially attempting to starve people out into doing what you want. And I think that is a very dangerous precedent to set in this case in particular, because like how I feel like this response is disproportionate to the threat level that the virus presents. And I don't think that you can look at any scientific data that is currently available to us and argue differently. And part of that is, basically we've already got data that, and people can get upset about whatever I'm about to say. It's fine. 78% of the hospitalizations for COVID to date, or 78% of the hospitalizations of COVID to date in America, were people that were overweight or obese. But, in terms of public health and safety, we're not really encouraging people or mandating people to go exercise, right? You don't want to be hospitalized. It turns out statistically, you're far less likely to be hospitalized at all, vaccination or no, if you're in good health and you're keeping your weight down. But we don't mandate that, right? The other layer is that we all know, like they've come out and said at this point, that the vaccine itself does not prevent transaction of the disease. It mitigates the symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Like it helps prevent your chances of getting severe cases of the disease. And that's great. Like that's part of the reason why I got it. But it doesn't prevent transmission. It doesn't prevent contraction. And so it's one of these things where I'm like, okay, so we're in this situation where, people are still wearing masks, by and large, depending on where you are. I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think close to 70% of the population right now in America are vaccinated anyway, or at least have gotten one dose of the vaccine.
Yeah, I'm not aware of the most recent statistics, but it was getting up to 70.
Right.
Last I checked, that was a few weeks back.
Yeah.
And that was that first dose. Yeah.
Right. And so I'm like, and then you have the study that came out of Israel, which you can actually look this is on Science Magazine, science.org. These are reputable sources. Like, they've found with their statistical evidence that actually if you've already contracted COVID, even when in regards to the Delta variant, you actually have a higher immunity to it than if you were somebody who didn't contract it and just got the vaccine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, if you collate all that data together, this is something that at this point, and I'm not saying that this was true originally, but at this point, I don't see, especially when we talk about like the COVID death rates that we have, we know that the majority of those cases of COVID deaths were people that had comorbidities or were already immune compromised. So this seems like a very poor reason to take a mandate this far and to be this aggressive, purely because at this point, I don't see how the disease itself presents more of a threat than a flu variant would. And other than the fact that it's highly transmissible, it transmits more heavily than the flu does technically. But at the same time, if you're in good health, if you're not immune compromised, if you're not, really, really old or really, really young, and especially because it's become now commonplace in a lot of in areas where people wear masks when they go out in public places.
Well, it's also burned through our population a lot.
Right, yeah.
So a lot of people who've had it, there's a lot of people who are vaccinated, a lot of people who have had it and may potentially have a lot more immunity, thank you,
yeah.
to even the variants.
Mm-hmm. And so it's what is, to me, when I see a threat, I'm not saying that it's not a threat, it's still an issue. But if you assess with the data that we have available, the level of threat that this virus actually presents, and then you compare it with this kind of response, it signals to me that either the people that are writing this are alarmists, or this isn't really about public safety. And that's my biggest concern, is that they have been consistently pushing this line of this is about public safety, this is about you need to do this for public safety, while they've even stopped really, for the most part, I haven't heard on the news, I've heard of hospitalization rates, but I haven't heard of death rates like they were doing before when the disease when the virus initially.
No, hospitalization rates have actually gone down as well.
Right.
Again. But weather's getting cooler, so last time this happened in the summer of 2020, it was going down there too, and then it went back up during the winter, so it might happen again.
It might.
But what you're getting at is the death rate has gone down significantly, and that is true.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yes.
It's very good.
No, that's
so
great.
you're getting at the point that the proportion of response to this thing may be a little bit it's overkill. Too much. Overkill. Thank you. Yeah.
And it's overkill to the point to where now your cure is probably going to do more, this mandate is going to do more damage than the virus would.
Right. There was a huge backlash to the lockdowns last year in 2020 because people were losing their jobs, and there was an argument going around saying, at what point are we overcorrecting and hurting people financially and hurting our economy financially versus the virus hurting people physically and medically.
Yeah.
And, at the time I was I think we have to find a balance here, because I think both sides have a good point. Today, it seems like maybe that economic side, since we do have a good idea of how to deal with the virus medically, a lot less people are dying when if they contract it at all. And now we need to worry about getting our society back up and running again. And it's kind of been running, but there's so many delays with a lot of, shipments as far as worldwide shipping of materials, and everything is just kind of delayed. Prices are going up and down. The dollar's worth less than it was last year. There's a lot of things happening that we that are priorities. And then people are, there was a nice couple weeks there in June, I think, or May, I'm not sure anymore, where at least in Maryland, we were kind of living life back to normal.
Things were pretty much back to normal.
It was really lovely. And then all of a sudden,
we got to be scared of this again.
The D word came out, and everyone started kind of reacting, Delta.
Yeah.
And, very much more transmissible from what I understand. But again, the death rate didn't really increase.
Yeah.
And I know there were stories that were going around about hospitalizations going up and hospitals being overrun. I could not verify those stories on my own everywhere. I know some places it was true. I know there was some false reporting about that as well, especially Rolling Stone, very good at misreporting things, it seems like, from 10-year tradition now. Anyway, but a lot of hospitals were not overrun too.
Yeah.
And that's not to say the virus isn't serious. It is. But I think we now have a better understanding of how to deal with it. If you want to choose to wear a mask and be vaccinated, that's your choice. That's good. I choose to do that in most places, mostly because of social cues I'm getting from people's eyes.
I mean, I'll be completely honest. Unless an establishment has it posted that it's mandatory to wear one, I won't, because I'm like, look, I've already gotten it and I'm vaccinated.
Yeah, that's right. You did get it.
Like,
yeah, you're feeling. Yeah, and I definitely I think no matter where you are on the side of this issue, I think we can all agree we're really tired.
Yes.
And sometimes that manifests in me just being like, I'm just gonna go in here and live. Like, if I'm going into a restaurant, I've seen people walk into a restaurant with their masks, go to their table, sit down, take off the mask. I'm just gonna cut out that middle step and just walk in and sit down at my table.
Because who is that really helping?
No, it's just it's theater. But if I'm in a, I think what you said was correct. If the business asks, private business asks, or if a public building makes that their thing, of course I'm going to follow their rules and make sure that.
And if you don't want to follow it, go somewhere else.
You can choose to go somewhere else.
You have that choice.
You can choose to go somewhere else. But the problem that you're saying here is the federal government is mandating that you must take this medical procedure, basically getting a vaccine, in order to work in businesses that are larger than 100 employees or more.
Which is most of them.
Which is most of them. You said 80% of the country does that.
80 million people. So
sorry, 80 million people.
One third
of the country. Yeah, thank you. So you're saying now the federal government is making it so that you have no choice in the matter of where you work and where you prosper. And that's the issue you're having. Not the vaccine itself or the efficacy of it or anything, but the fact that this is a precedent that's being set by the federal government, and according to what you just said, you feel that the reasons that they're outlining for this mandate don't line up with the reality of what we're dealing with today.
Correct.
Okay. And the fear is that they could take this precedent of mandating something like this, not necessarily a vaccine in the future, but do you all remember 9/11? Of course you do. We still have the TSA.
Yep.
And it's been shown time and time again that they have not prevented a terrorist attack.
We still have the Patriot Act too, in terms of surveilance laws that were changed.
Yeah, Edward Snowden showed us all what's been going on, and nothing has really changed. So this is all just to say that when the government has something, like has the precedent to do something, they will test those limits and they will push.
Once you give the government power, it's not giving it back, not willingly.
It's not going to take that back at all.
Right.
Yeah.
And
we've seen it time and time again.
And we had this conversation when it was about masks a year ago. And that was my warning, as I was just like, look, if you let the government apply this level of pressure, they're not going to stop there. They're going to see how far they can take it. And now we are here a year later with a much more aggressive push in a far less dire scenario than we were last year.
This is a politicized topic.
Yes.
Very politicized.
Yes.
And I say that because there's a lot of people out there who support this. You see it everywhere. I mean, I've even had conversations with people who, are very much for universal health care, but have then turned around and argued for, well, if they're not vaccinated, we shouldn't allow them into hospitals. We shouldn't give them health care.
Who was that, Jimmy Kimmel?
He was one of those people, but I mean people in person I've talked to. And I just turn around and I'm like, wait, but I thought we were celebrating the idea of, when Obamacare was passed, the pre-existing conditions thing is out.
Yes.
This is a principle of universal health care, that no matter who you are, no matter what your choices may have been, whether you're overweight or you smoke or whatever it may be, you will not be denied health care.
Right.
And that is a key thing. And whether I agree with you or not to be vaccinated, are we really about to deny people care because of that? And you're just going to turn around, and that's purely because it's politicized. It's nothing else. I think it's just people choosing sides and being, what's the word?
Dogmatic.
Thank you. Dogmatic and tribal.
Yeah.
absolutely tribal.
And it's also a combination. Like I'm gonna just lay out the timeline, like because I feel like we forget what was happening at the beginning of this, and I think doing the whole timeline actually is very revealing in terms of just how much this is a tribal argument and not about like anything like scientific data or public health. And I can say that because like if you actually rewind the clock back to like 2016 during the Democratic primaries.
Don't say his name. We're gonna get demonetized.
Oh, okay, fair enough. So, wait, can I not say any part of it?
I'm just kidding.
Is it the first name or the last name that gets us demonetized?
You can say Drumpf.
Can I say the Donald?
No, now we're banned. Thanks, Reddit.
No. But yeah, like in that election, like there were multiple people, like prominent Democrats, when the previous administration, I'll word it that way. When the previous administration,
I was just kidding.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding. But like when Trump was touting Project Warp Speed as a boon to his presidency and his administration.
Are you saying 2016 or are you talking about 2020?
What did I do?
You were saying 2016.
My bad. 2020. My bad.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah,
I was thinking of like the election.
Yep. Nope,
okay, so we're now talking about 2020 when Project Warp Speed.
My bad. 2020.
Funding billions of dollars into certain vaccine research in these companies.
Yep. And he was patting himself on the back on that. And at that same time, you had, prominent Democrats, Kamala Harris included, saying on stage that she was not going to take that vaccine. She didn't trust it. The first group of people that asperged doubt on these vaccines were the opponents of Trump. Mm-hmm. That had nothing to do with public health.
I do remember that. That was very silly.
And then suddenly...
As if he was in the lab himself, cooking up a Democratic killing virus machine.
Right, yeah. And now we fast forward, and the exact same people are suddenly going like, I don't understand. Like, it's completely stupid why somebody would be vaccine hesitant. And I'm like, you started it. Like, what do you mean?
Well, they started the politicization of it.
Well, but you also started asperging doubt. Like, they were the first ones to do it.
Sure.
And so, like...
I can completely understand why several people still haven't taken their vaccine. And I'm not talking about the ones you might be thinking.
Yeah.
For political reasons. I'm thinking of people who are the downtrodden, the working class, essentially, lower working class people who, they can't even afford to take a day off.
Mm-hmm.
And so let alone 2 days off, potentially, if they have a bad reaction from a vaccine.
Yeah.
They can't take time off to get the vaccine. They can't take time off to deal with the side effects. Because I know everyone basically had some sort of bad time with it for 24 hours or so. Yep. And some people even more. But for me, it was, it wasn't too bad, but I felt comfortable. And honestly, I was fortunate enough to work in a job where they were like, they understood, like, no, stay home if you need to.
Right.
But there's a lot of working class people out there who, there are service industry, there are retail workers. They can't afford to take time off. They can't afford childcare if they're going to get this vaccine and their children have no one to look after them. And I know this is kind of a tangent, but I just want to put that out there that vaccine hesitancy is not just angry white guy. It's a lot of people out in this country who
It's actually a lot of black people.
A lot of black people, a lot of brown people, a lot of every people.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons. Everyone has a story. Everyone has a background. Everyone is different from each other. Mm-hmm. And they're going to make decisions for themselves based off of their lived history and their understanding of what they can and can't deal with. And a lot of people don't feel like they can deal with taking time off because they're losing out on income, which is a terrible situation to be in, and we shouldn't have that happen at all. They shouldn't be relying on these jobs every day just to get by.
Yes.
That's a problem for sure. But this is a reason why people are not getting the vaccine in certain instances. And I think it's a lot of people who are in that situation, unfortunately.
And not to mention that, the powers that be that were in charge of managing this crisis did very little. If you're looking at the history of the timeline of these events, they did very little to instill trust in the public.
Oh, absolutely. No, they kind of forfeited their right for anyone to take them seriously.
Yeah.
Time and time again.
I mean, first it's you don't need to wear a mask, and then it's psych, you do need to wear a mask, but I said that so that way the medical people could have masks.
I would give them the benefit of doubt on that. initially because, new information comes out and you kind of move with it.
Okay.
I'm getting to that.
Okay.
Because like new information might come and it's like, oh, actually we were wrong about that. We're sorry. This is actually the data here, and this is what proves that to be true. But in this case, I think what you were going to get at is he was like, no, we actually said that, so we didn't want to cause a panic, and we didn't want people to get the masks because
so we knew that it would help, but we said otherwise.
They proved, or they showed that they lied willingly, and then, it's happened again.
Back then, it was like, oh, the lab leak theory is a conspiracy theorist, to the point to where even like
Facebook was taking down
posts. YouTube was demonetizing stuff that was asperging that. And then it turns out that, psych, the very guy that said that the lab leak theory is a complete farce is the guy that was also involved in materially investing in the lab that actually caused, that we know is now pretty much a lab leak.
Yeah, not Fauci. It's another gentleman that works for another organization. His name escapes me, but I think I know who you're talking about. He was the one who wrote that letter, but he's also intimately involved with that lab. Who was, definitely working on bat coronaviruses.
Yep.
And this is not just us saying bullshit. This is
they
proven
testify
fact.
in front of Congress
this
about
is
it.
proven fact now.
Yeah.
And now it's a theory that, I mean, you don't talk about it really anymore because it's not a controversial point, but it's, from the beginning, it always felt a little weird that you couldn't talk about that. Like,
yes.
It's racist to talk about that. I'm like, how?
I
mean, Jon Stewart put it best, and I won't do it any justice, but he was just, saying, are you, do you remember this? Have you seen this?
Do. I have.
The lab that works on bat coronaviruses
in
Wuhan
China
is not responsible for the Wuhan virus. I mean, but that's a racist thing to say, apparently, in some circles, and I find that utterly ridiculous, because if we want to get at the truth of what happened...
Well, I find it to be intellectually dishonest, frankly.
Say that again?
I said I find that intellectually dishonest to even suggest that, frankly. Like, to
suggest what?
To suggest that even entertaining the idea that it might have been a lab leak is somehow racist.
Yeah.
It's intellectually dishonest.
Oh, it is. But like it's politicization. Politicization, I think, is the word. And it's not trying to get at the core of what happened. It's not trying to find truth. It is trying to win an argument despite the facts. And we see this time and time again. And so I've grown very tired of listening to, quote, the powers that be, because they've proven themselves to be untrustworthy people. And, they might have some good points here and there, but it's really hard to see where their heart is when they've lied time and time again. I mean, even Dr. Fauci, who I think, has made some really great points over time about this virus, he said that, in the beginning, when we get vaccines in, we need like 50% of the people or 40% of the people to get it, and then we'll start developing herd immunity, and we'll start being able to open things back up. And then he changed that to 60, and then 70, and then 80, and then when he was asked about it, he's like, why is this number changing about how many people need to take the vaccine in order for it to be effective across the United States? He said, well, I wasn't sure the American public could handle the number.
Right.
And I'm like, that's not your job to determine what we can handle. That's your job is to tell us the truth.
To my point, the fundamental problem here is that when you approach it just on a person-to-person level, if you approach a person with mistrust, how do they respond? They respond with mistrust of their own, right? And so what you have done is repeatedly shown that you don't trust the American public to make wise decisions. And then you are surprised when they in turn do not trust you, when you tell them that this is what needs to be done and it's for your own health.
And it's a shame. It's a shame, because we really should be all in this together to fight this thing off and to return back to, learn from this experience and be a better country, and then get back to fixing some of the ills that have plagued us before the pandemic.
But this is precisely why I admonish, like, you can't just because you're afraid of something is not a reason to hand more power and control to the government.
Absolutely not.
Like, because the minute that you let them know that that's possible, they will just make it their business of making you afraid of things. Which
is very scary. Very scary. How much are we afraid of in this society?
Right.
So much, like from when we were children, in the 90s, and I know we're Americans, so, very different life experiences to
Right.
people outside of this country, especially outside of the West. It was a very different world. I don't know how many people remember this. I mean, our age group, we don't remember much of it, but I've been in a state of fear on some level of anxiety since 2001.
Yep. Yep.
We're constantly under attack in every sense of the word.
Yeah. Everything's under attack. Every aspect of American life, philosophy, idealism is under attack always.
Yeah.
Your identity's under attack. Your children are under attack. Your money's under attack. Your freedoms. And what's funny is that, like, now I genuinely believe, and I guess I'm not really helping this, I genuinely believe that, like, this provision in this bill presents an attack against your freedoms. Like,
Another one. We laugh, but it's serious.
Yeah. I mean, we laugh so that we do not cry. So
I'm drinking.
Right. Yeah. That's
so that I can produce tears.
But
no, but seriously.
Yeah.
It marks a new step forward through a new threshold.
Because now, essentially, if this comes to pass, what we have, the precedent that we have set is that if the government can make, and the government and the mainstream media and whoever it is that, like, I forget what, Silicon Valley, can make the public afraid of something enough, they can create a scenario in which if you don't follow the direction, you get to be destitute. Like that. And I don't think that's a world that genuinely, like, if you step outside, if you just take a deep breath and step outside of any anxiety or fear or whatever that you have about this particular topic, and you were to apply that concept to something that you think is benign right now, like, let's say you're not afraid of car crashes. Most people aren't. Generally, most people drive cars.
Yeah, we drive cars.
Like,
I mean, there's a risk, but we
all are willing to take that risk.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, if you apply this concept to, like, oh, cars are dangerous now, let's make people afraid of cars. If you don't, get such and such kind of particular license and buy this particular kind of car, you don't get to have a job. What? like we would think that that's untenable. But
better yet, make people afraid of public transportation.
There you go. Mm-hmm. There you go. That's one. You need to have a car.
You need to have a car.
If you don't have a car, you can't have a job.
If you don't get the car, you can't get the job.
Right.
And we're not going to provide the public transportation for you anymore.
Right.
That's your other option.
Right. And obviously this is hypothetical, but, like...
And then how are you going to get the car if you don't have the job?
Right. And so, like, honestly, I think this is a pivotal moment. Because, like, if you really look back at the history of America, like the birthplace of America, what was that war started over? It was more than one thing, but, like, the straw that broke the camel's back was tax on tea. like we used to be a populace. We came from a heritage of going, like, no, even the little things matter. And we're willing to, this is something that is downright biblical. Not that everybody is, Christian or believes in that, but I think that the truth of this scripture actually holds true regardless of whether or not you believe in the Bible, is that he who is faithful in little is faithful in much. It doesn't matter if it's small. That's not the point. The point is the principle. If it's wrong, it's wrong. No matter if it's a large wrong or a small wrong, it's wrong. And you need to be diligent in fighting against those sorts of things, those impositions, even when they're small ones.
Now, do you think, we're speaking as if this is a malicious intent situation where, testing the boundaries of what the government can do, and let's try this, and let's poke here, and let's make sure this happens potentially. Let's see if they fight back on that. Mm-hmm. Now, how much do you think that's actually intentional versus just, maybe it is, like, there's a lot of people in Congress who think, hey, my constituency is really freaked out by this thing. Maybe it's laid out by us. Maybe it's laid out by the mainstream media as far as, like, we got to be freaked out by this. And, they will respond they will respond positively. To me, I'll get voted back in because I'm clearly taking a stance on this and I'm fighting against the virus and I'm making sure that, our population is vaccinated, and now we're just setting standards up and setting safeguards so that people are incentivized to take the vaccine. We don't want anyone to be destitute. No. We want people to be incentivized to take the vaccine.
Well,
how much do you think that
incentivized is a soft way of putting it?
But it is. It's an incentive.
Well,
it's a very strong incentive.
Incentive implies carrot. This is just stick.
Big stick.
This is very big stick.
Yeah. No, but seriously, like, how much do you think is it?
I don't think it's that at all. I would be willing to go, like, I actually think that it's 100% malicious for the people that are in support of this. And the reason why is because of events like the Met Gala. You have all of these people that suppose that could take that stance, that could have that opinion, that could be doing it in earnest and honestly. And yet they do not practice what they preach when they're given the chance, right? If you genuinely believe that this was an actual threat, that this was something that was a public health issue, this was a safety issue, when they show up to public events of their own, when they're having fun, they'd be masked. But the servers are masked. Senators aren't. Like, they're not practicing what they preach.
But they're vaccinated.
Okay, well, then why are the masks still in place for vaccinated people?
That's a good question.
I've
been asking that since it got reinstated.
Why are there no provisions? And and they're the same ones that want to say trust the science, which is a stupid phrase in itself, but I can set that aside for now because science is a process. It's not like a magical word that makes things happen.
It's a good hashtag though.
It's good.
Solid hashtag. Great job, guys.
Whatever.
Marketing.
But like, they say trust the science, and yet the science suggests, at the very least at this moment, that if you have gotten it and recovered it, the vaccine doesn't make you more, like, it does make you more immune, but the benefit that it gives you is minuscule at that point. So like, you're pretty much inoculated as it is if you've contracted it and recovered. But there's no provision in any law, any mandate, anything that they've issued that provides a caveat for that. Like, hey, get an antibody test. If you still have antibodies in your system, you don't need to get it. Fine.
Oh, that would be sick. Why don't they do that? That's a really good idea. I was just thinking in my head, well, how would they prove if you've had it or not, or you're inoculated, all that? Like, yeah, just do an antibody test everywhere.
Yeah.
Like every week, do an antibody test. See where you're at.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. I don't know how expensive that would be, but it can't be more expensive than buying 1 billion vaccines.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's just like, there's no provisions anywhere that make sense.
Yeah.
It's just vaccine.
Right.
And, it's one of those moments where I actually think that, and here's why I'm going to get to the part of the conversation where the disclaimer became necessary from earlier. Like, my stance on this is as a response, like if you're somebody that is hesitant to get it, or you've talked to your doctor, because that's the other thing is they're mandating this, and like people aren't like they haven't written in any provisions for medical exemptions of any sort. Like, you could talk to your doctor, and your doctor could tell you like, hey, actually no, it's not safe. I would not suggest you getting it because of these reasons in your personal health. And now you're still going to lose your job. But like, we've reached a point where like, you have to find a way to inoculate yourself both against the virus and the solutions that they're proposing to help fight the virus. And the first thing that came to mind to me is, in terms of an inoculation to this mandate, is LLC. I would actually argue, like, if I was in that position, I mean, we have a business already, but like, if I was in this position of like, I was the sort of person that either didn't want to take it or had a medical reason or some other reason, whatever, my reason is irrelevant. If I had a reason for not wanting to take it and you told me that my job was threatened for it, I'd go, okay, I'm going to create an LLC. I'm going to become a private entity. And then the business, who, by the way, we're in a labor crisis, they don't want to have to fire you, really, if they need the workers. Okay, if they need the workers.
Especially if you're a certain type of skill set that, it's hard to come by.
Yeah.
High demand.
Yeah.
Right.
So like, if that's the case, then I'd LLC up and just go like, hey, I've made a business that performs the exact same services that I was providing for you earlier, but now you can just hire me as a contractor, and now I don't count as an employee, so you don't get fined, I still get to work. We win. Like,
yeah.
And
influx of LLCs.
Yeah, no, and that's frankly what I want. I like there should be a signal that is sent. Like, I mean, right now what's happening in Australia is horrific in terms of like, and I understand people's reaction, but like, you don't want our country, any part of our country, to turn into the war zone that is Australia right now. And I feel like this is a very peaceful alternative to that, of sending a signal to the powers that be that it's like, this is unacceptable.
Right. That and taking it to court, but that does take some time.
That takes time. They already win at that point, because unless they can get an emergency injunction from the Supreme Court on something like this that will delay the enforcement of said bill, unless the Supreme Court goes that far and says that you can't enforce this until the case has been worked through, it'll go into law, and then you'll have to follow it while it's going
through the court system. Yeah. And that could take years to...
That could take years.
Right.
And by that point, the damage is done.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter.
Right.
And, you know, further, and my personal opinion on this is like, you know, pay attention to who of your, you know, representatives vote yes on this bill, even if it doesn't pass. Pay attention to those who vote yes on this bill. And I personally will be doing that for my state. And if our representatives from our state, from our state vote yes on this bill, when it comes time for midterms, and I think that, and this is going back to entirely different episode from a year ago, but like, I don't think that the argument is actually between Democrat or Republican at this point. Like, I actually think that, again, I will say what I said in 2020, we need other options available. So I would actually, like, the way I'm going to go is I'm going to find any alternative to a Democrat or a Republican if our state representatives vote yes on this. Like, that's how I'm going to do it. And I would encourage other people to do the same. Because that's another way of peacefully signaling that this is not okay.
Well, that is the reason why our system was built that way.
Yes.
But it's very hard to fight the two-party system that's in place right now.
Well, it's hard because we all agree that it's hard.
Yeah. That makes it hard.
Yes. The minute we stop agreeing that it's hard, it stops being hard.
Right.
And, you know, you also have the, like, and I know we've kind of jokingly referenced it before in this episode, but, like, I know that a lot of times people, like, there is this conversation around, like, internet censorship occurring with these private companies. And people are getting shut down for certain conversations. And that's obviously very troubling. And I would say that, frankly, this is a situation where you don't really have any power to stop that. So my suggestion to you is start having real conversations with people in real life.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
yeah, I love that suggestion. That's seriously, you know, I give you a lot of crap because you'll tell me stuff that you say to people, and I'm like, was that in person or was that on text? And you're like, oh, I was texting them. I'm like, they didn't hear it the way you thought you sounded.
No, I know, you're right.
Yeah, no, they didn't. Like, you think it was a massive victory, but it's like they didn't hear your words. They didn't hear you speak it to them. And everyone thinks that way, by the way.
Yes.
Like, about what they say to people, like, oh, I owned them, and it's like, no, you didn't.
They didn't hear anything you said.
They didn't hear it the way you thought you said it, you know?
And I genuinely admonish people. I was talking to my girlfriend's sister and, like, laying out some of these facts to her because she was, like, completely flat. Like, she didn't know any of this. Like, the stuff that we've talked about tonight, like, she didn't know any of it.
A lot of people don't.
Right. And so she was just like, everything seems hopeless. Like, I feel so destitute now. And I'm like, no. It's not hopeless. Like, that's exactly, like, they either want you to be ignorant of it or they want you to feel like you can't affect it. Those are the two modes that like these people want you in. Okay. And the way that you get around that, I was just like, and I was saying it jokingly. I'm like, you're a good looking girl. You got plenty of friends. Get your friends together. You're popular. Like, get your friends together. Start talking about real issues. Start talking about people that you can identify in your community that you think would be in the right frame of mind, that has the right perspective to solve some real problems for you guys.
Yo, build your community again.
Yeah, build your community again.
Yo.
Like, stop letting the Silicon Valley build fake communities, build your
friendship groups. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's this whole year for me in a nutshell, is realizing how important face-to-face interaction is with not only your community, but just people in general, people of all walks of life around you. Mm-hmm. I'm not the best at this, admittedly, but I've tried to be better about reaching out to people and seeing them face-to-face and talking for hours on end. It's just so eye-opening
Mm-hmm.
and refreshing, and it's exactly how we need to operate. That's how we're built to operate.
That's how this country got started.
Yeah.
It took, I was recently, took a trip with my girlfriend. It's a hike, really, to DC. And, they have a, I don't know what to call it, but an installment near the Lincoln Memorial where they actually have, like, they in stone, they carved in all the signatures of the Founding Fathers on the Declaration of Independence, and you can see all of them and, like, their signatures and who they were. And I was like, this country started... Granted, they had money. A lot of them had money. Most of them had money.
No, they weren't the best people ever. But
right. This country was like the ideas that sparked this country were started by like 30 guys. It took 30 guys to go up against, at the time, the largest empire the world had known, and won. And like, that's my point, is that it can start right there. Like, do you have 10, 20, 30 friends? Start getting together over some drinks. Drinks are great. And start talking about real stuff. Don't talk about talk about whatever you want in terms of like, oh, did you see this movie or the Netflix show or whatever? Like, that's fun too.
Bro, that's how today started for you and me.
I know.
Just for everyone who's aware, it's 7:00 in the evening right now. Alec came over to my house at 11:15 this morning.
We spent like 3 hours talking about TV shows and movies.
Yeah, no, I see you sometimes, but I don't see you as often as we need to.
Right.
Yeah. Get your conversation started, have a great time, talk to people, but also don't just talk about, that stuff alone. That stuff's great, but there's a world out there that needs you. Mm-hmm. It needs everyone. To be aware of what's happening. And you may agree with a lot of it. That's fine. But let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And be open to talking about it with others. Test your ideas. Get your ideas out and let people, fight them. Debate you.
Yeah.
See how your ideas hold up. How do their ideas hold up? Maybe you learn something new. I think that's the only way we can kind of really find out what the truth is on our own terms. Not being told the truth, but discovering it.
Yeah. And I'll put it this way. I'll try to make it poignant this way. Before this bill was introduced, OSHA basically said that either you got the vaccine or you had to be tested weekly to make sure that you did not have the virus, right? I argue that, the brain viruses that are infecting our country, infecting our willpower, infecting our way of seeing things as they truly are just as dangerous. And therefore, you should get together weekly and inoculate yourself against those viruses. Get together weekly with the people in your world, in your community, the people close to you, and start branching out. Yeah. Bring in more people, include more thoughts, and just figure out what's wrong. Like, what do you all agree on that is a problem that needs to be solved for you guys? And then start working up solutions. Like, anybody can complain. Mm-hmm. Like, anybody can say that, oh, this is a problem, but it takes it is brave, but it is also fundamentally American to sit together, talk through problems, and actually try and come together with solutions and do something about it.
Yeah, and also reaching across to people who may not agree with you. Figure out what they're about, what makes them tick, why they think the way they do.
You might learn something.
And they might learn something too. Hopefully they do. And the divisions that have been created, the lines that have been drawn, those start to erase over time. And I think that's what we need.
Yes.
We need way more of that, way more understanding. Like, we don't all have to agree on everything. We shouldn't.
No. That would be boring.
But this country and our society will fall apart if we do not reach out to others and try to figure out, how to speak to one another.
And work through our ideas, work through our problems.
Yeah, come to compromises, make solutions happen. And hopefully that brings about a better society overall. Yeah,
and I think that genuinely that's what I want this podcast to really be geared towards is just we're gonna every time we do a podcast, it'll be about a specific subject. I swear, I promise you guys, I'm not gonna do.
This is the annual podcast episode. So tune in next year.
But I promise you guys, it's not going to just be political stuff. Like I promise you, I don't want to talk about politics all the time.
No, it's just that's what gets us kind of riled up in our everyday lives. So you call me and you're like, well, I want to talk about this. We haven't had dust off the microphones. We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it, Omeed. That's you and me.
That's what I sound like.
A million years. A million years, Omeed. We're gonna do it. Man Bites Dogma, episode 2, episode 3. We're gonna episode 1,000,000, Omeed. Just you and me against the world.
That was perfect. I love that.
It was perfect. Good.
Yeah, it was lovely.
It wasn't a good rendition of the voice, but that's fine.
It's fine.
All right. Well, do you want to end that there, and we'll think about another episode to do another time?
Yeah, for sure. So as always, like, share, subscribe, whatever.
Yeah, we're on. I think we'll see if everything's still working. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever I think other podcast services are out there. And I believe YouTube for as long as they want it up there. No video, no more video. It's just easier for us to set this up with mics in my little basement.
Yeah, if you don't want it to be an annual podcast, this is the price for now.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, thanks, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Let us know if you like this, if you want more. We'd love to do this more. So we look forward to the next one.